going to talk about social media today and ways that you might think about using social media to improve your practice in OB anesthesia. The learning objectives are in the syllabus, so I'm not going to repeat them here, and I have no disclosures. One thing I do want to mention is if you're interested in emerging technology in medicine, if you're interested in social media and how it might be used to advance medicine in general or obstetric anesthesia, where I learned everything and where the bulk of my work comes from is Medicine X. I'm the executive director of Medicine X, which is Stanford's premier conference on emerging technology in medicine. And so if any of the ideas resonate with you, if you're interested in learning more about new technologies and how they might impact healthcare and medicine, our conference is in September at Stanford, and you can certainly learn more about us through our website. And just a quick mention, we do get some funding for our work in the AIM lab, both from societies like SOAP and IRS, but also the NIH and other government agencies. And our model is actually really unique because we take the Wikipedia model, so a lot of departments of anesthesiology in the United States and around the world who benefit from our work make voluntary donations, so I want to acknowledge some of those people today as well. And here are just some of a few people who've been involved in our projects in the AIM lab. So let me start off with a question. And I wrote these down because these are actually real answers I got from people when I asked them, what is social media? So we're going to do a poll. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if this is what you think is social media. Sharing what you ate for breakfast this morning. Okay, this is a real thing. Becoming a celebrity and growing your fame. That's another one. I got that from the students in my lab. Polishing your sterling reputation as an obstetric anesthesiologist. Or recruiting more patients to your practice. Now, I see no hands going up, which probably means these comments and commentary that I get, I think reflect probably not the audience that's here today, which is obstetric anesthesiologists or anesthesiologists in general. We're a consultant practice, and so our reputations online we don't really focus on so much recruiting patients to our practice. And so maybe we haven't given a lot of thought to having a presence online or a presence on social media. And certainly I don't know that physicians in general are part of a culture of sharing what we ate for breakfast or sharing all the minutia detail of our everyday lives. But there certainly are a growing group of physicians in the world who are looking at social media, maybe not in these ways that I just said, but in other ways that we'll talk about in the next few minutes. And so the first thing I want to explain is that social media isn't just Twitter, it's not just Facebook. Think of it as a myriad of online or smartphone apps where you can, as an individual, contribute your ideas to a community, retrieve the expertise from other members of that community, and explore ideas and content that's generated by everyone who is involved. And so really, unlike the traditional ways of sharing information in academic medicine, meetings like this, where we meet in person, social media is really about meeting at all times, anywhere, at any time, because we're not constrained by physical presence. And so what it does is it really, I think, empowers a way for users to create information and knowledge for each other, and for information to flow faster between people. So we don't have to wait once a year to come to Shnider, but we can talk to each other throughout the year and exchange information and ideas. And more importantly, the other thing that's a big changer with social media is who we talk to. So, one of the things is with social media, we're not just talking to each other as physicians anymore, but it opens the door for communications among third parties and other individuals we never really thought to have dialogue with before, including patients. And so this is a great book by Kevin Foe, if you're interested in learning more later, about what an online reputation is, how to see what yours is, and to learn more about social media and how it might play into your practice. But in that book, Kevin brings up a great point, and this is something we've explored a lot at Medicine X, which is that social media is also a great way to bring patients in as partners into your practice and what you're doing, to have conversations, to build trust in that patient community, to understand what are the outcomes or the problems that matter most to patients, what are the misperceptions and misconceptions out there in the real world pertaining to what we do as obstetric anesthesiologists. We can make those connections online and through social media. And oh, this is my 360 selfie with President Obama. This was, Medicine X was invited to the White House to participate in the Precision Medicine Initiative Summit. And I show this slide because it's a great illustration of what I think is changing in healthcare, changing in research, changing in practice, changing in policy. We're entering into a new culture, and the culture is sharing, because the Precision Medicine Initiative, which really is personalized medicine, maybe by a different name, but the whole premise of that initiative, which is to jumpstart innovation in healthcare by using information to create more personalized care for patients, that whole initiative is based on the culture of sharing. Patients must have trust in the system to donate and share their data, not only with us as physicians, but with government, with agencies, with third parties, so we can better understand how individual variability can be used to guide and predict and create personalized treatments. And so the White House and the government have really built this initiative around bringing in patients and third parties, the non-traditional people at the table when we talk about science, when we talk about research, to work together as partners and to have that transparency and that open dialogue means to create a culture of sharing and a culture of trust. And we'll see a little bit later in the talk, sharing doesn't necessarily mean sharing our personal information about what we ate for breakfast as physicians, but it means sharing our knowledge or our ideas. And I understand we all operate in this environment where we're so pressured and we have so much work to do and we have such limited time. So I definitely don't want you to feel that what I'm saying is going to add to your work, but I'm saying I want to offer some ways that you might consider pursuing in terms of enriching your own experience as physicians or enriching your own education and your own ability to take better care of your patients. So let's talk a little bit about social technology used by anesthesiologists. So I actually have some real data. So one of the things the AIM Lab does, we do annual surveys of all the anesthesiology residents in the United States. And of the ones who use our programs, our products, our services, right now that's around 40% of all the anesthesiology residents in the country. So one of the things we know, anesthesiology residents are high adopters of computing technologies. They, on average, own more than one computer. And the red bars show the majority of them, by far, rank themselves as knowledgeable, very knowledgeable, or extremely knowledgeable about computing technologies. And it is a mobile generation. In 2014, we noticed for the first time that the percentage reporting smartphone ownership went above 100%. So actually, some residents have more than one smartphone, and predominantly iOS-based for the last 3 years. 75% are iOS-based. Now, what that means is they're a mobile generation, constantly connected to the internet, and they're on social media. And you'll see that data in a second. But here's the important thing to know. Residents, and I think residents also, as you can see, our data goes back to 2016, so these residents are now attendings, and this new generation of anesthesiologists. They're not content creators. They're content consumers, and they're content curators. So keep that in mind. Being part of social media and participating in the conversation doesn't mean you have to go out there and spend a lot of time to write a blog post or do a video on YouTube. A lot of it is about curation. It's about retweeting or resharing things that you find compelling and interesting. And what we're seeing here is also really remarkable. So in 2014 was the first year that the majority of anesthesiology residents had Twitter accounts. How many here in the room actually have a Twitter account? Raise your hand. Okay, all right. I'm thinking next year we're going to see more, maybe, have Twitter accounts. But we've seen 500% increase in Twitter account ownership since 2010. Huge increase in YouTube account ownership. And not surprising, MySpace and Wikipedia have gone down dramatically. But we know residents are on social media. And we know some of the anesthesiologists in the room are on social media. But why aren't more of us on social media? Well, I think probably we don't really understand what it is, and we don't really understand what it can do for us, what it can tell us. So what I did, and so this is kind of your typical, for those of you who aren't familiar with Twitter or social media, a lot of the time, a lot of people access it simply just on their smartphone. And if you don't have it, consider getting a Twitter app on your phone. And what you see here is you just, you can do a couple things with it. One of the things that I think is very useful is to subscribe to channels. So to find a few channels where, and channels are basically topics where the discussion is going around a specific topic. And then when you open up Twitter, you can get in one screen as you scroll down all the conversations about a particular topic. And it's a great way to very quickly scan new news and developments that are coming through. One of my colleagues says it's like if 100 of your best friends were curating content for you each day and showing you just the most important and relevant papers, evidence coming through. Twitter, when done right, is a great way to benefit from crowdsourced curation and making your time more valuable because you can navigate new information more quickly. And again, that process has nothing to do with you sharing anything. You're just benefiting from the contributions that other people are making in terms of adding new content to different channels or hashtags on Twitter. So one of the things that I wanted to do as an experiment is I used Simpler Signals, which is a great social media analytics platform. And if anyone's interested in learning more about this, come see me afterwards. But it's a great way to ask questions about what people are saying on social media. And one of the things that's really neat is it can do sentiment analysis using a set of algorithms that can analyze the text of tweets and tell if it's a positive or negative sentiment. And so I just did a quick search on the keyword epidural. And you can see here, green is positive and orange is negative. And in general, there's slightly more positive than negative about what people are saying about epidurals. And then what I did is I segmented the conversation, because with Simpler, we can actually do that. And we can go in and see, well, what does everybody think about epidurals? And then what is the sentiment being spoken by healthcare providers or physicians versus patients? So you can see here much more positive sentiment coming out about epidurals from physicians, and maybe a little more mixed among patients, though generally more positive. I'm not going to spend a lot of time to read you these tweets, but these are some examples of the positive and negative tweets that are coming out when you look at everyone. Not surprising, some of the negative tweets are around things like having back pain after an epidural. And when you look at providers, you know, some of them are giving actually useful information about how to prepare for your admission to the hospital. Now, so one of the things Simpler does is it uses a variety of databases to tag individuals as either doctors or healthcare providers. So this individual is having a comment about epidurals, early epidurals, but it's not clear if they're, you know, if they're a nurse or other type of healthcare provider. But you know, Simpler is great because you can go in and you can really quickly get a sense of what people are saying. What are the common misperceptions and misperceptions that are out there? These are some comments from patients. And it's a great way to really quickly get the temperature of what is the public, what are providers talking about and thinking about in terms of issues that are important to you. And you can go in and dive deeper through that data and also use that information to help guide your questions that you ask in your own research, or certainly to get a better idea of how to discuss topics such as neuroaxial anesthesia for labor with your patients and colleagues. So real quick, we talked about Twitter. How many people use Facebook? Yeah, Facebook, okay. YouTube, okay, yes. Anesthesia Illustrated, where we get all the soap videos. Okay, a few people, okay. All right, so one of the things that, that I've found useful about social media is you start to become part of a community. And that I call it a community of practice because we're all organized together trying to do things. And a lot of my time I spend on medical education. And so I thought this quote was great. It's one of our community members from Medicine X and talking about how Twitter's fast becoming my favorite kind of social media. It's authentic, immediate, and it's peer reviewed by hundreds rather than just a few powerful people. It's a democratization of medical education and of our expertise network. And it's a great way to prototype questions, especially when I'm trying to learn about how to use new technologies. Periscope, for instance, was a new technology that Twitter unveiled, I think last year, which allows live broadcasts. And I was trying to explore how do we use it. And I went to Twitter and I immediately got 10 great ideas on how we could use these new technologies. FOAM, or Free Open Access Medical Education, is another great Twitter hashtag and channel to follow. It's a whole community that's just focused on medical education and sharing great medical education content with their community. And I love this quote: Twitter is like your foam butler. It is a filter that delivers content to you. And I think that's a great way to think about it. And so really, I think part of the stumbling block of getting on social media is knowing which communities to join, which hashtags are the important ones to follow. And I mentioned to you that I run Medicine X, and Medicine X is our conference on emerging technology in medicine. We do it every year at Stanford, and I'm just going to share some of the social media data. We are the most discussed healthcare conference in the world. This is a network centrality diagram where each one of those dots is a person, and all of the conversations that are happening are the little lines around the dot. And here's what we learned when we worked with Simpler. When you look at the top 100 influencers of all medical conferences in the entire world for the past year, only 1% of the participants are patients. Only 7% are doctors. Keep medical conferences in the world, and 7% of the conversation is doctors. And the rest, the other 93%, are third parties. And so really, in many ways, healthcare conferences is an echo chamber really talking to itself. And here's what's unique about Medicine X. We bring a diversity of stakeholders into the mix. 35% of the participants in our conversation are patients, telling us the problems that matter most, participating in the discussion as respected experts in their own experience of their chronic conditions. 20% are doctors, and 45% are third parties. And so when you look at the network centrality diagram, you see a much more balanced conversation going on, a freer exchange of ideas that drives more innovative thinking, because now we're breaking out of silos and we can talk to each other and we can learn from each other. And that's something that social media is remarkably good for. Our meeting at Stanford is 350 people. Each year during those 3 days, we reach 5.5 million people in 69 countries. Now, one thing I want to do, I want to end my talk with a few examples for obstetric anesthesiologists. So, yes, we can have meetings that happen once a year and they're on Twitter, but you can also have virtual meetings, meetings that have no physical convening, that happen only on Twitter. We call these tweet chats. They can happen once or they can happen on a weekly basis. And this one, labor pain chat, was a tweet chat that was organized by the ASA and by ACOG. And together, these two organizations created an online tweet chat where they brought together patients, non-physician providers, anesthesiologists to have a discussion about labor pain. It was a remarkable discussion. The transcripts are still available online. Simpler is a website that you can retrieve all of the transcripts from these conversations. Here's a great word diagram that kind of summarizes all the main words that happened during that tweet chat conversation. Again, Simpler can give you the breakdown of this. But here's a slide I want to point out. This is the network centrality diagram for that ASA and ACOG sponsored tweet chat. So here's the interesting thing. So this shows you the most influential person in the chat. And so I'm sure many of you know this person. And Robin Elise Weiss, I believe she is she's a non-physician, but a birth expert. And you can see here the ASA is tiny little dot down there. ACOG, tiny little dot down there. And so, I think what this emphasizes is these conversations are happening in real life. Actually, I think if you go through transcripts, you'll be really surprised at some of the remarkable conversations. Women who've had an amniotic fluid embolism participating in the tweet chat, talking about what that experience was like, what they learned from that experience, what they would tell other patients about the importance of labor analgesia. But if we're not online, if we're not part of the discussions are going to happen anyways, we just won't be part of them. And I will end with Wrong-Footed, which is another great story. This is a story of something that went wrong. A patient went in for surgery to a hospital in the UK, and they were going for foot surgery. Long story short, the WHO checklist was followed. The patient was properly checked in by a pre-surgical nurse as well as the anesthesiologist and the surgeon. But they ended up operating on the wrong foot. So now what they could have done, and probably historically what they would have done, is had an internal M&M and discussed it and written up and reported it to some database. But instead, what the NHS did is they said, let's share this story on Twitter. Let's make sure everybody knows what happened. And that's what they did. They shared the entire story of what happened, and then they asked the question, what could we have done better to the entire Twitter community? And what was interesting is that one person responded that this actually happened at their hospital 12 months earlier, but they never shared the story. And if they had shared the story and let people know, maybe they would have avoided the mistake. Now, luckily for this patient, they actually needed both feet operated on. So the patient wasn't harmed, which I think was one reason why they were more willing to share the story publicly. But what I want you to reflect upon is how social media might help you improve what you do. How might it help you understand the patient journey and make connections with the patients that we care for outside of the operating room and the labor suite? How can we begin to value the expertise that they bring to their experience of healthcare and their own conditions? And how can we better understand ourselves in the context of our work in society? And finally, I'll just end in the last 10 seconds with some other great resources for you. Figure One, if you haven't seen it, it's a great app that you can get for your smartphone. I call it Instagram for doctors. It is an ability to share medical images and cases through a secure private network. And again, also the SOAP Facebook page. Brendan Carvalho, Alex Butwick also has a great obstetric anesthesia page on Facebook. And of course, our videos, many of which are already online, on the SOAP website. So thank you very much.